Hey guys, this is Communications, and welcome back to another review, this time of the first ever Amicus horror anthology film. Now, they've done a lot of horror anthologies, and this is their first film, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. Now, this is a film that came out in 1965, so I'm reviewing a pretty old movie. I usually don't review movies like this old, but hey, I'm a big fan of horror anthologies. I like Amicus's horror anthology films. I enjoy Asylum. I liked Tales from the Crypt. I liked Vault of Horror. I haven't seen From Beyond the Grave, and so I wanted to check out more of some more horror anthologies. I'm still gonna get around to other reviews and so forth that I said I was gonna do earlier, but this is actually a film I saw a long time ago. I saw this months ago. It was so long ago, I can't even honestly tell you exactly when I saw this. That's how long ago it was when I saw this movie. And it wasn't much. Honestly, I was kind of disappointed by the film. Since it's the first ever anthology film by Amicus, I was expecting something a little bit better, a little bit more memorable. I thought this was a pretty weak anthology, to be honest. There was one story that worked, one story that I really liked, and the rest of it was forgettable or lame or just. I understand it's 1965, so they couldn't get away with a lot in terms of gore or blood. But at the same time, I don't even agree with that. I don't even know if that's a valid excuse because in the 60s you had Hammer films that were bloody and had a little bit of grit and gore to them. This just felt like it was tame. It definitely felt tame in comparison to other horror anthologies, but I will give it respect where respect is due for the fact that it was the first Amicus horror anthology. So it was the start of the Amicus horror anthologies. So you got to start somewhere, and most of the time you don't start off right off the bat with you just being absolutely amazing. So I'm okay with the fact that okay, I respect the film for the fact that it was the first one in the series of anthology films by Amicus, but at the same time, this is a film I have no problem with never seeing again and never really owning on my collection of horror anthologies because I would never watch this again. If I was going to watch anything, I'd watch one segment with Christopher Lee, and that's it. But there are some things that were interesting about it, and if you're a fan of this film, that's fine with me. It just was not my cup of tea. I felt it was kind of dull, and I thought it had some really lame stories in it for the most part, except for one really good one. Now, the film came out in 1965, like I was saying, and it's directed by Freddie Francis, who directed a good amount of the Amicus horror anthology films. It stars Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, as well as Max Adrian, Ann Bell, Peter Madden, and a very young Donald Sutherland, which was a curious thing to see and interesting. The basic gist of the plot is this. Five men enter a train carriage in London, bound for Bradley, and they are joined by a sixth mysterious person, a passenger, Dr. Schreck, played by Peter Cushing, whose name he mentions is German for terror, which I believe is obviously a reference to Max Schreck, the actor who played Nosferatu in the silent film Nosferatu, directed by F.W. Murnau. Now, during this journey, the Doctor opens his pack of tarot cards, which he calls his House of Horrors, and then he proceeds to reveal the destinies of each of the travelers. And this provides the framework to tell the five horror stories. This is the wraparound. It's a really weird wraparound. And first off, the title for this film does not fit the movie at all. It's called Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, but they throw this his cards are his House of Horrors, but that doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense. It's more likely a train of terror. Really, it's the train of terror. It's the night train to terror before the night train to terror happened. And if you heard that, that was my knee. Damn, my knee just popped, and I don't know if you heard it or not, but man, that was pretty loud. It was loud enough it even shocked me. But anyway, get back on topic here. So yeah, the wraparound I thought was kind of weak, and I'll get to how it ends later. But anyway, the first story is called Werewolf, and it concerns an architect, Jim Dawson, played by Neil McCallum, who travels to a Scottish island to his former house to make alterations requested by the new owner, Mrs. Biddulph, played by Ursula Howells. And Mrs. Biddulph is described as a widow who bought the house to seek solitude to recover from the death of her husband. Behind a fake wall in the cellar, he finds the coffin of Count Cosmo Valdemar, who had owned the house centuries ago. Valdemar was killed in a conflict with the Dawson family and had vowed to exact revenge. Vowed to exact revenge, because, I don't know, take exact revenge? That doesn't make much sense, but that's just my mistake. On the owner, he vowed to take revenge on the owner of the house and claim his former home. And Dawson soon discovers that Valdemar is emerging to take the form of a werewolf in the night, and he believes that the housemaid was killed by him. So, believing the owner, Mrs. Biddulph's life to be in danger, he melts a cross made out of silver by his ancestors to protect the house from Valdemar's spirit, to make silver bullets. Maybe he should have called Rudy from the Monster Squad. Then it might have taken care of this in a very grand and entertaining way, instead of the boring, forgettable way that we barely even see the werewolf. I don't even think you even see the werewolf. That's how cheap this story is. Lame it is. You don't even, I mean, if you do, it definitely you don't remember it. So, I'll give it this, though. There was some good cinematography by Alan Hume, and some good lighting and so forth. It was definitely eerie, but it wasn't a very memorable segment. So going back to the plot, he believes Mrs. Biddulph to be in danger, so it melts a cross made out of silver, which I guess his ancestors left to protect the house from Valdemar's spirit. He makes silver bullets, which according to the legend are the only means of killing a werewolf. So you can't blow them up with dynamite, you can't, acid, you can't run them over with a car. It's silver bullets. Or Rudy with silver bullets. And then on the night he encounters the wolf as it is about to attack Mrs. Biddulph, and he shoots, and then he's baffled that the bullets don't kill it. And then Mrs. Biddulph reveals that she had switched the silver bullets with ordinary ones, and she reveals to Dawson the true legend was that Valdemar would exact revenge on the last descendants of the Dawson clan, and that the placing of Dawson's body in place of Valdemar's in the coffin would bring Valdemar back to life in human form. She reveals she was Valdemar's wife who would deliberately lure Dawson to kill him even after 200 years. And that's the twist. And I gave it away. Spoiler. I'm gonna spoil the sport. That's just how that's just how I am. That's the segment. That's werewolf. You don't even see the werewolf. You don't really see the werewolf. It's got some good lighting, but I thought the segment dragged on way too long, and it finally got to its denouement, and you were like, this is just kind of lame. Like, I just wasted my time, really. The character, McCallum was not much of it wasn't much of a performance, and it was just not much of a segment. It was a really forgettable segment. I barely don't remember anything, and I know I saw this months ago, but still, a good film, a good horror anthology, stuff can still, even if I saw it months ago. Creepshow I saw months ago. I've seen Creepshow millions of times, but there's still sequences from that film that are still burned in my memory. And I can just think of them and they'll pop back in my head without any problem. This, I don't have much other than some creepy lighting, some good cinematography, and other than that, it's just, I thought was a pretty lame segment. So then we have the second segment of this movie. Is called Creeping Vine, and this was ridiculous. This is the story that has Bill Rogers, played by Alan Freeman, and his family returning from vacation to discover a fast-growing vine has installed itself in the garden. And when the plant seems to respond violently to attempts to cut it down, Rogers goes straight to the Ministry of Defense, where he gets advice from a couple of scientists played by Bernard Lee and Jeremy Kemp. It soon turns out that the plant has become intelligent and harbors homicidal tendencies towards any threat to its existence. Now, this is something that this segment had possibly, maybe it could be good. I don't know. It might be a fun segment, but it's just so silly. That's the problem. I understand you don't want to take it seriously. I mean, but you have lines like this. A plant like that could take over the world. It's just a really corny episode. It's like there's one thing that every intelligent thing is afraid of. Fire! If a species ever develops that isn't, It could be the end of the world. And it was just like, oh, yay. Evil plant that has a mind of its own. And the effects are laughable, even for 1965 standards. It's just like a plastic, one of those plastic fake ivy plants you've used for decoration that you'd have to dust all the time and don't really want to deal with it, but fuck it, your grandmother or somebody relative likes to have fake ivy around for some reason. I don't know why. Window dressing, pretty much. And it eats a dog in a laughable way. Because there's I remember this as the performance is really bad. It's talking. It just it was laughable. I got some entertainment out of that segment because it was so laughable. Like the effects, they're looking for their dog, and then their dog gets eaten by the plant, and it's recording lines of dialogue like I just mentioned, and overall it was more memorable than the werewolf segment because it didn't drag on so long, and it just it was what it was. Pretty much I think I don't necessarily remember how. I think it ended like with some kind of the plant did escape or something, and it was going to take over the world or whatever. I think if I remember correctly, and I'm really not sure because, like I said, I saw the film. Like maybe the synopsis helps. Yeah. Yep. Creeping Vine. Here it is. You have Bill, Carol played by Phoebe Nichols, and Ann Bell that return home. Ann notices that a new plant and tells Bill to kill it off before it affects her flowers. Bill can't cut the plant, and it looked like it screamed. That's it. That's what really made me crack up. Is they're trying to cut the plant, and the plant goes ah or something like that. Whoa! I don't know if it's exactly like that, but it's just the image of a plant screaming when you're trying to cut it is pretty funny. And Jerry Drake, played by Jeremy Kemp, is a botanist who's going to check it out. Carol plays with Rusty the dog in a ball, and she then goes to have tea, and then leaves Rusty to pick up a small play ball next to the plant. The plant kills Rusty, in a laughable way, and then the plant was messing with the soil all over the place because it wants to find a better place to grow or something. And then Hopkins, played by Bernard Lee, he makes a study about vegetable life, and he determines that it must be a mutation which has given the plant some intelligence to protect itself. They think it's a fantasy, but a plant like that could take over the world. And under the microscope, a brain is found in one of the plants, and Carol won't play in the yard without Rusty. And then the plant attacks Jerry and then strangles him, and it looks pretty laughable. And then the vine cuts the phone wire and doesn't let anyone out. Anne holds Carol. The vine is all over the windows. Hopkins realizes that the vine is afraid of fire when it tries to get away from the match he lights. Hopkins uses that to leave the home and call for help. However, the vine kills him and then learns to put the fire out. And yeah, like I said, I just wanted to make sure I pretty much knew how it ended just to refresh my memory. And yeah, the plant figures out how to stop fire, the one thing that could kill it. So we're all fucked, pretty much. That's what that segment's telling us. That we're all fucked and we're all gonna get strangled and die because of some intelligent, smart vine. Which in itself is kind of creepy, but the segment just didn't handle it well. It was just laughable. The next segment was just terrible, like really shitty. I hated this segment. It lasted forever. I kept looking at my watch. I actually stopped the movie at this segment. I was watching it one night, and this segment was so bad, I fell asleep. I woke up, and the segment was still going, and I stopped the movie because I'm like, this segment was just shit. It was pure shit. And it's a segment that is called Voodoo. And it's one of those segments that's trying to be funny, but it just falls flat on its face. And it's supposed to be the humorous segment of the film, but there's nothing about it that is remotely funny. And you have a character named Wally, played by Russ Henderson. He's a musician at a band. He plays the trumpet, and it felt like an excuse just to showcase this shitty jazz band. That's pretty much what it is. This shitty jazz band that the director knew or somebody knew about from the production, and let's just have them be the leads and just showcase their shitty music and their shitty acting and just make the audience want to leave in droves and never want to see your movie again. That's just how I felt personally. If you like this segment, be my guest. But I hated this segment. I really did. It does not hold up well at all nowadays. It's extremely dated to its humor, to its music, to everything. It's just a terrible segment. It's not even scary. It's just boring and lame. So Wally's this musician in a band. He plays a trumpet. His agent Roy Shine, played by Harold Lang, sends him to DuPont in the West Indies and tells him that he'll play at the Flamingo over there. So Sammy Coyne, played by Kelly Lynch, is leaving, and the band is his replacement. So then the cigarette lady, yeah, there's just a cigarette lady. We don't even know what the fuck her name is. This is Valerie St. Clair plays her, and she has a weird ring. And then everybody stares at Biff, not the Biff you're thinking of, played by Roy Castle, who is mocking Voodoo. And Sammy then tells him not to mess with it, but Biff won't pay attention, and he sees the ritual. Cigarette Girl is there hanging out, dancing, and having a good time, but Biff doesn't realize that he's been surrounded by male dancers, which I guess is supposed to be terrifying. Freddie Christopher Carlos is furious that Biff has written the music of the god Damballa, played by Thomas Baptiste, and Varim pushes Biff away. Biff says that he'll record the song when he's back in London, but he said he's not afraid of Damballa because Damballa can make like a tree and leave. But at that moment, the balustrade breaks underneath him and he falls into a pond, which the balustrade is just, I think, like a bridge or something like that. And back in the London, a musician, Tubby Hayes, tells him to be careful with messing with voodoo. So that's the whole thing. Just don't do the voodoo thing. Don't use this song. Don't do that. I'm like, don't watch this segment. Why? Why is this even? It's not even horrifying. It's barely even. This segment barely even qualifies as a horror segment in a horror anthology. The only thing horror about it is technically the voodoo thing. So it does don't be messing around with that voodoo. And then Biff and his band play a tune based on the voodoo rhythm. And then Damballa shows up. The breeze becomes wind. Windows open. It's as if Carrie White is a special guest that night. And it becomes night. It becomes night. Customers start to leave. Panic spreads. The owner decides to do up all the place again. Which I'm looking up on IMDb somebody's synopsis. I don't know. Maybe their English isn't their first language. I don't know. The owner decides to do up all the place again. Anyway, the owner decides to lock up the place or burn it up or get rid of it while he collects on insurance. Tubby advises Biff not to take Damballa or the score home, but Biff is nervous and he falls to the floor. Then there's a commercial for Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, which doesn't make any sense. It's trying to be meta, but it doesn't really have any context. Biff then arrives home where he lives alone. The window then closes because of the wind. The lights turn themselves out as Damballa picks the score from his voodoo song from the fainting Biff and leaves while Biff is still on the floor, knocked out. And then Biff wants to see his fifth card and he sees that it's death because Biff was one of the characters in the film. Russ Henderson. Segment sucked ass. I guess it was adapted by the television series Thriller in one episode, and it also was adapted by the radio series Suspense. Either way, it's just not suspenseful. It's not scary. It's forgettable as fuck. It's just a terrible segment, and terrible humor, terrible music, terrible editing. Just terrible pacing. It is the slowest segment of the entire film, and it's utter garbage. The next segment is the best segment of the film. So thank God, after this, just the worst that the film has to offer, finally you have a really good segment. A really good segment that, in my opinion, is the only good segment in this film, and is the one that stands out on its own. And you can watch this one again. And this one stars Christopher Lee. And that's another reason why it works. Christopher Lee plays this character named Franklin Marsh, who's an art critic who seems more concerned with his own devastating wit than with art itself. Painting Eric Landor, played by Michael Gough, from Alfred from Tim Burton's Batman films, bears the brunt of one of Marsh's tirades, but gets even by humiliating the critic publicly. In a really fun way, too. Uh, humiliates him with a monkey. Which was the whole thing, because the art critic was saying that your artwork looks like it was done by an ape or something like that. It's pathetic. And then he comes in and he actually has the monkey do some artwork later, and like it sells and people are going crazy over it. And then he just it was pretty entertaining to see Christopher Lee get one-upped by Michael Gough, but he can't stand that. In fact, he can't stand being embarrassed so much by Michael Gough, because Christopher Lee was freaked out by the monkey. I'm just trying to remember exactly. Yeah, monkey dressed in overalls. So yeah, Franklin Marsh, he says that Michael Gough's painting is remarkable because it's an atrocity. And a group of spectators tells Landor of what's happening. The painter goes out to talk to Marsh and questions his authority to judge his black and white abstract etchings. The lady then brings out a colorful painting, which Marsh praises to no end. The balance, the color, the brushwork, the humor of the whole composition. And then Landor then shows him and the audience who painted everything. It was a monkey dressed in overalls and a navy t-shirt. Like I was mentioning, a monkey did the artwork, and Christopher Lee loved that, but he called Michael Gough's painting terrible. So a spectator, played by Pauline Chamberlain, then laughs at Christopher Lee in his shrill voice. And then at a formal dinner, Toastmaster, played by Frank Forsyth, introduces Marsh, who has to give a speech, but Landor shows him cutouts of a monkey, and that makes Franklin feel dizzy. In another exposition, Landor inquires about Marsh's opinions, and then Landon scares him away just for standing by his side. And then, really, which I thought was pretty funny. So it was basically Michael Gough is trolling Christopher Lee, and it's a lot of fun to watch. But Christopher Lee can't stand, Franklin Marsh can't stand being trolled by Michael Gough's character, Eric Landor. So he really gets pissed. He gets so pissed off that he decides to run over and kill Landor with his car. But what happens is he just ends up causing him to lose one of his hands. So unable to paint anymore, Landor commits suicide. And then the rest of the segment is really creepy and eerie, and actually definitely the scariest segment in the film, where then Marsh, Christopher Lee, is then tormented by the disembodied hand of Landor, which seems immune to fire as well as escaping attempts at containing it. And you could probably guess how it ends. Landor gets his revenge. Christopher Lee ends up in a ditch somewhere because his car crashed, and it's just the way that the hand keeps showing up, and you think it's gone. You think he's gotten rid of it, but it shows up back up again to terrorize him. And it's pretty chilling. It's pretty chilling and effective segment. I recommend it. If you can find just that segment by itself, the crawling hand, on YouTube or somewhere, just Disembodied Hand. The Crawling Hand is the name of another movie, actually, with the same sort of plot. And I would recommend it. But yeah, then the last segment is Vampire, where this is where you get Donald Sutherland. And Donald Sutherland returns to his home in the United States with his new French bride, Nicole, played by Jennifer Jayne. He realizes soon that there is evidence that a vampire is on the loose, and Carol seeks the aid of his colleague Dr. Blake, played by Max Adrian, only to find out that his bride is the vampire. And following Blake's advice, Carol kills Nicole, but when the police come to arrest Carol under the charge of his wife's murder, Blake denies giving any such advice, and then when the police takes away Carol, Blake says there's not enough place in the city for 2 doctors or 2 vampires, and he turns himself into a bat. Not an effective segment to me because, once again, I thought I had pacing issues. I thought some of the effects were kind of laughable, even for 1965 standards. And it was just kind of pointless, I thought, in a way. I mean, I like Donald Sutherland, but the whole thing, I mean, he cuts himself with a can opener. His wife doesn't want him to tend to the small wound, but kisses and sucks on it. There's a bat that flies around, strings. Bob feels tired. and Waiting for Dr. Blake, Pumper Max, Adrian. It's just the bats keep showing up, and I just thought it was kind of lame, really. Because really, you don't see a lot of typical vampire stuff. Like, you just see the bat, and the bat looked pretty laughable, so it's a little bad on strings. But anyway, it's just my personal opinion on that. It's just, I like seeing Donald Sutherland, though. He did a good job, and his performance wasn't bad. At the end of the day, I mean, the acting, for the most part, in this film wasn't terrible. It was pretty decent. But I just thought for the most part the film wasn't really that entertaining. I thought the best things about it were some of the cinematography, some of the performances, and some of the score was decent, and one of the stories, which I really liked. And then you have the epilogue where it ends with a twist. From the tarot cards, the doctor informs the men that the only way they can avoid their horrible destinies is by dying first. So when the train stops, the men find out that they are dead, and they had already perished in the train wreck, and Dr. Shrek is revealed to be Death himself, which is predictable. If you've seen so many of these horror anthologies, it's a pretty predictable ending. But yeah, the base of the film was a conscious attempt by Milton Subtosky, one of the producers, to repeat the success of Dead of Night, which is a film from 1945, where Subtosky wrote the original stories in 1948, and when he was employed as a scriptwriter for NBC's Lights Out series. And filming of Dr. Terror's House of Horrors began at Shepperton Studios with a budget of £105,000, and the script began as a stillborn television series in 1948 during the time when Dead of Night was a recent release. Milton Subtosky considered that movie to be the greatest horror film ever, and used it as a blueprint for Dr. Terror and the rest of Amicus's horror anthologies. And Donald Sutherland was actually paid £1,000 for his performance, which was probably a decent amount of money for back then. Now, yeah, like I said, it's just not one of my favorites. It's actually one of my least favorite Amicus horror anthologies. One of my least favorite horror anthologies, period. I enjoyed the next one that came after this, Torture Garden, a lot more. And what's interesting is Torture Garden is considered by a lot of fans of Amicus's horror anthologies to be one of the least, the lesser ones of the series. And this one, a lot of some people put it near the top, and it's all personal opinion, and I definitely disagree with that. I think this is one of the worst horror anthologies from Amicus, but you got to start somewhere. But it had one really good segment, which I thought was really great, in the Disembodied Hand with Christopher Lee, and it was a lot of fun. It was entertaining, and it was actually pretty creepy. Now the other ones I thought were either boring or I thought they were lame, and they didn't really stand out from even some of the lesser segments in Black Sabbath, for instance. But anyway, I really don't know what to say about Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, except if I was going to rate it out of 5 stars. I didn't care for it that much, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a film that was extremely shitty. This isn't really a rant. This isn't a film that, at the end of the day, like I said, I really loved one segment, but there were other aspects of the other segments that I liked. Like I said, the cinematography, some of the performances, like Donald Sutherland, for instance, and a little bit of the score, and some bits and pieces of the plot. But I just thought some of them dragged on way too long. If I was going to say one segment which was insufferable, it would be the Voodoo segment. But the Creeping Vine I could watch because it was funny. It was so bad it was funny. And the first segment had some good atmosphere, but it didn't have the best payoff. And then the last segment, Vampire, was another one of those where it had some decent atmosphere, but it was fairly predictable. I pretty much predicted the Doctor was another vampire, so it really wasn't much of a surprise. And but it was watchable once you get past the Voodoo segment. But just because the Voodoo segment is there, that's why I would say that this is definitely a below average film for me. So that's why I would give it 2 out of 5 stars. So, yeah, I really don't know what to say about the film except thank you for watching my review, and I will see you guys later. See ya.